Hello and welcome. I'm so excited to welcome all of you to today's Alta Live. Joining us today for a discussion with West Coast booksellers on their picks for summer reads in a variety of specific categories. I'm Beth Spotswood. I'm Alta's digital editor, and I'll be leading today's roundtable discussion with Kayla Kleinman, who joins us representing bookshop.org, Luisa Smith of Book Passage in Corte Madera, California, and Rick Simonson of Elliott Bay Book Company in Seattle, Washington. I will take this trio of literary experts through a round robin of sorts. I'll ask each for a book pick in a book category. So we're going to go kind of category by category, and each of our experts will offer their one or two titles in those categories. This will be very fun, and I really encourage you to chime in with your picks in the chat or your questions. If you've got a specific book you're looking to find, a recommendation that we don't talk about, please use the Q&A button underneath the video you see here. Some brief housekeeping. Alta Live is the digital interview series we do here at Alta Journal. If you're unfamiliar with Alta, our brand new issue might be of particular interest to this crowd. We're an award-winning quarterly magazine and website focused on California and the West. You can join us as a member for as little as $3 a month and support the work we do, including our monthly California book club, which I imagine this crowd would be very on board with. It is free and very fun to join. We also present weekly events like this one today and create this beautiful quarterly magazine. Again, there's a Q&A button at the bottom of the screen to ask questions for our guests. We will chat for about 30 minutes and get to as many of your questions as we can. Don't worry, this interview will be recorded and posted to altaonline.com later today. It will also be emailed to you if you've registered for this event, as well as a list of all of the books we're talking about today. So don't worry, our wonderful editorial assistant, Jessica Blau, is taking copious notes and keeping a list for us. So we're gonna write everything down and get that to you later today. It is so nice to be with our fellow book nerds today. Let's see where everyone is. I see Hollywood Hills checking in, Point Reyes, Orinda, Sacramento, Brooklyn, Angels Camp, Berkeley, LA, Cupertino. Please let us know where you're zooming in from. I am in Novato, California. Crowd, where are you? Luisa, let's start with you. Where are you today?
Today, I'm actually down in Los Altos, California.
Got it. Kayla, where are you?
I'm in New York City.
And Rick?
I'm in the basement of Elliott Bay Book Company in Seattle.
Fabulous. Well, welcome Pennsylvania. I love it. All right, Pittsburgh, 2 PAs. Naples, Florida. Welcome everyone. So what we're going to do is we're going to get started. Why don't we kind of go in the order we just did? Luisa, Kayla, Rick. And we're going to begin, pretend drum roll. Let's start with fiction. Luisa, what are your picks?
Our favorite. And we all read a little bit differently in the summer, don't we? The things we're looking for, the kind of escapism that we want, and maybe something with hope and fun and something a little different. My first pick today is something that I think all of my booksellers have gotten super excited about, and I'm excited about. It's called Lessons in Chemistry. And in it, it's for people who loved let's say the Rosie Project or Eleanor Oliphant. It is a character unlike any other, a woman who's a chemist in the 1950s and 60s who has incredible sort of strength of character and bucking sort of the trends where it's hard to get ahead as a chemist, and becomes the host of the Most Unusual Cooking Show, or as she likes to think of it, a chemistry lesson for the women around her. She's also raising a genius daughter and has maybe the world's best dog character right now named 630. It's a book about humor and being yourself and sort of bucking the trends and bursting out of the boxes that society has around you. So it's actually really relevant for today, but a comic novel that's going to be super fun for people to read when they're out on vacation or enjoying this heat wave that we're experiencing. And then another book, if you want something something a little bit different but absolutely wonderful, is Last Summer on State Street, which takes place at both today and in the 1990s in Chicago, in a housing complex, which is going to be demolished at the end of the summer. And it's 4 friends who are falling apart, and the girl who's looking back on her childhood and what happened. It's about living in a place that is so often ignored, being a person growing up in a place that, society is sort of let down, but also the joy of community and of friendship and family. It is a deeply moving book, but I want to emphasize that it also has an incredible spirit and joy inside of it. So a fun book also to read this summer.
Love it. Kayla.
So my first pick is Every Summer After by Carly Fortune. Unfortunately, I do not have the book because I pass it off to my mom, which to me is always a sign that I absolutely loved a book if I demand she reads it next. This book is the quintessential beach read, as this like perfect slow burn summer romance between 2 people over 6 years meeting at a summer home in this like dreamy lake community in Canada. It was Every Summer After by Carly Fortune. And it's just this like fantastic slow burn of a romance told over the course of 6 years and then going back and forth between then and now. I read it while I was on vacation earlier this month, and for me, it kind of set the bar very high. And after that, I was like, cool, there is no other book that I can read after this. So it's that kind of book. And then my second book pick is One Italian Summer by Rebecca Searle. I feel like everyone I know and follow on social media is in the Amalfi Coast right now. I am not. And if you're not as well, this book just feels like the essence of Italy. It is about the idea of if you could go back in time and spend time with your mother when she was in her 30s as well. So it's this really beautiful book about grief and also going back in time to meet your mother and what it would be like to be on this Italian adventure with her.
Wow. Rick, fiction.
Thank you. And it's a pleasure to be here. And I actually seeing very quickly who all's attending. I give a shout out to Jasmine Darznik, a novelist who a few years ago came up here to Seattle to be part of the Iranian Festival. We have an Iranian festival, which happens this weekend. And she was reading then for a novel about Farouk Farrokhzad, the poet, Song of a Captive Bird, I believe. Summer's still been a figment of the imagination up here outside of daylight. It's been a wet, cold spring, now becomes summer. So the summer thing is a little hypothetical still. The books I would, among the many, there's so many coming out right now, but one that's about to come out, and it's going to be in hardcover, this is one of the advanced copies, is a book first published in England called The Mermaid of Black Conch by an English writer named Monique Roffey, who's originally from Trinidad. She's had several books published in the UK, but this is the first one of hers that I know of to be in the US. And it's a book that feels, it's set in the Caribbean, but it has a feeling anywhere, such as out here where there's water. It involves a sea being who resembles a mermaid, I guess you could say, who starts having various encounters with humans, some very hostile, some incredibly affectionate. And it has this very moving, and yet, I guess, engaging or entertaining way of how we see ourselves as human and other species. And what it moves through takes you through the range of human emotion and greed, avarice, but also love and empathy. So it's a marvelous book that our friend John Freeman, who is a West Coast fellow through and through, but is now editor at Knopf in New York, he's bringing to us. The other one, this book, The Immortal King Rao, is a book by a writer named Vahini Vara, who has lived in California. She grew up in Seattle. And to my surprise, because it is being pitched as a novel of India, which it in significant part is, it also has some of the islands up here, literally outside Seattle in it. And it traces multi-generational story of a Indian family that starts off as Dalit, they're the lower caste in India, but also then becomes a tech story of kind of ultimately social control and ways we're trying to deal with having nations or not nations. And so the place where the human is in that, she writes very knowingly. I think she was a Bay Area-based reporter on tech from the Wall Street Journal for many years, so she really knows that world. But she writes poetically and beautifully with this.
Fabulous. All right. I will also point out that John Freeman is our maestro of the California Book Club, which is, again, free to sign up for. We'll send you a link. All right, Luisa, nonfiction history.
Nonfiction history. Before I start nonfiction history, I'm so glad that Rick noticed that Jasmine is in the audience, and her new book, The Bohemians, is just out in paperback, and everybody should go check it out. It is so great. Nonfiction history, we're going to start with a great Californian story. I think most of us know Stanford University, and living as close to Stanford as I do, I thought I knew it pretty well. But I had no idea that there was this incredible mystery around the murder of the founder, one of the founders of Stanford University, Jane Stanford. She and her husband, Leland, founded Stanford. And at the time it was covered up. She was poisoned with strychnine. It was the second attempt, like the first successful attempt of murdering her. And it was covered up by Stanford, who wanted to keep all that money flowing to them because they were such big benefactors. But she was a fascinating woman who was very involved in sort of occult theory and stuff, and some interesting ideas. And there are a lot, the author finds out there are a number of people that maybe wanted her dead, and one who definitely had the means of killing her. So it is a wonderful history for the region. It shows that sort of dirty political side of San Francisco that we like to ignore behind all the pretty painted houses and such. So this is a wonderful book for anybody that's interested in a little murder and mystery in their history, which personally for me is my favorite kind of history to read. And then a story that I didn't know, which is really fascinating, is We Refuse to Forget, which is actually the history of both Black history and Native history, where the Creek Nation actually both had slaves and accepted Black people as full members in their nation, and was recognized by the United States until the 1970s, when it got revoked. And even people that had been part of the nation for generations got their Creek tribe membership revoked, and the role that the US government played in it. This is a really interesting book for anybody that read The Word Was Passed or Heartbreak at Wounded Knee. This is a wonderful American story that has not been told. And it's also fascinating just the way that marginalized communities overlap and work with each other and sometimes against each other. So a really interesting book.
Getting so excited. Okay, Kayla.
Awesome. So my pick is Everything I Need from Me. Everything I Need, I Get from You. How Fangirls Created the Internet as We Know It. So more recent history than some other potential history picks, but still nonfiction. And this is a positive look at fandom and how it's become a hub for digital community online. I love a deep dive on kind of a more lowbrow kind of topic. So this is a great book just at how fandom kind of took over the internet in the early 2010s.
Cool. All right, Rick.
So the subject of nonfiction is a big, broad one. And I guess up here, I went sort of non-urban. I first thought of Barry Lopez's book, posthumously published book, which is essays, which isn't quite this category of history, except to read Barry Lopez is to read deeply and historically. He carries a great sense of history within place. This is a book that he helped put together. He passed away in December 2020 after many years of dealing with cancer. And these essays are deeply about place, especially Southern California. He spent much of his childhood there and does some deep work on the history of the San Fernando Valley, his own, seeing how much it's changed from his boyhood there 6 years ago to how it was in the most recent period of time. And he's a writer of great breadth and depth. And since he's not around now to talk up his work, as he was also, I'm sure he came to Book Passage in his years of publishing, but he was a generous presence in public appearances at drawing an audiences. It was always very deeply engaging. The other book that just came out in paperback is a book that came out a year ago. Is called Finding the Mother Tree. And that is a book by woman in British Columbia. She teaches at the University of British Columbia, named Suzanne Simard, who, as the person who has done the work, scientific work on trees and how trees are connected and related. There have been a lot of other writers who've, in nonfiction, taken glosses, or Richard Powers, The Overstory, has all sorts of depths to her work, which had not been in book form until this book came out first in cloth a year ago. But her book is also a human story. It's a story of her growing up in a logging family, so dealing with trees as part of their livelihood, and then working her way through the forestry world, which is both corporate, I mean, cutting trees down, but also very male. She, was referred to as Ms. Birch for many years, which obviously is a euphemism for a less polite word. But so she has it's a great story of, working through that profession. But the underlying part too is how extraordinary trees are and forests in individual and larger sense, and have a great lives well beyond ours.
Whoa. All right. Luisa, let's move on to biography or memoir.
Biography and or memoir. Today, I really want to talk about also a poet, which is sort of both, because it takes place. Ada Calhoun's father was an important critic, and he had been working on a biography of Frank O'Hare, the poet. And when he died, she found all these recordings of interviews she had done, and decided to try to finish the book that her father was going to write, the biography her father was going to write. And in it, she starts re-examining her relationship with her dad and the bohemian group that he was part of and the whole lifestyle. It's a book about the bond between a father and a daughter, and it's also about being an artist and what it means and how it affects the relationships in your life, and her relationship with art and her own work. And it's a wonderful portrait of Frank O'Hara too. I mean, it's so many things. It's a beautiful, beautiful book. And I just feel like we're really lucky to have this book to read right now.
Awesome. Kayla.
My pick is Left on 10th by Delia Ephron. You probably know her from the many, many films that she co-wrote with her sister, Nora Ephron, movies like You've Got Mail. She also was a writer on Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants, which I just recently remembered. And she writes about having had a rough couple of years, just really dealing with grief and the loss of her sister, then the loss of her husband, and what it means to come back from those difficult times, what it means to fall in love again after grief, and then her own personal medical issues. As I feel like I'm the token East Coast New Yorker here on this chat, so it's also very New York, left on 10th being the phrase that you say to the taxi driver when you're going home and saying make a left on 10th to get home. So if you love her movies, love a little bit of New York in your memoir, this is a really great pick.
Then Rick.
So having already, Suzanne Simard's book borders on memoir. And actually the other thing, to follow up what Luisa said, I'm sort of subliminally adding to the Ada Calhoun above me are a couple of copies of her book. She's here tonight. So when we came on, Luisa thought, oh, are you talking about Ada? And I said, no, she's here as we're getting the room set up for where she'll be in a few hours. So two memoirs actually coming from here, but speaking to larger places. A book that both of these are recently out. This is a book by, her name is Sasha Takshabla-Lapointe, and it's a memoir from here. She is a Upper Skagit tribal individual whose great grandmother, Vi Hilbert, we knew, was a great elder and storyteller, and the person who's done the more to keep the local Lushootseed language alive. She, she's engendered other people, and it's very much others are carrying on that work. Sasha's book is a story about music, about growing up under difficult circumstances, and yet having her great grandmother and others in her family, an extended family. She actually carries her grandmother's Skagit name, Takshabla, and so that part of it helps set this apart from a lot of the memoirs that are not, that are similar in age and what, some of the things that people are dealing with of, fulfilled, but also largely thwarted romance, substance issues, music, other things. I mean, the subtitle is The Ancestral Autobiography of a Coast Salish Punk. So there's that. The other book that just came out is a book called Ma and Me by a woman named Putsata Riang. And the Northwest actually has about 4 or 5 memoirs by women about their Korean mothers, ranging from Michelle Zauner's Crying in H Mart to E.J. Koh's The Magical Language of Others and Grace Cho's Tastes Like War. This one is a memoir of a Cambodian mother and her family's way of coming in as refugees, as when Putsata was a young girl, coming to Oregon and making their way here, which includes then at some point going back to Cambodia. And she goes back as a child and as an adult, and in fact, as a working adult, and she is a journalist now. And several things going on in this really rich book because it's got the ways of being an immigrant, a refugee immigrant, and ways of going back to Cambodia. They have no money here, but suddenly her mother's giving away money in Cambodia to show they're wealthy, or at least that giving that appearance. And then her own work going back as an adult journalist and human rights worker. And in there too is her realizing, acknowledging, and beginning to live her life gay or queer. And that's something that her siblings are fine with, but not her mother. And that's a big part of this book, which again works on several levels, and it's quite wonderful to read.
Is it not so fun to talk to book people about books? It's the best. All right, Luisa, a little biased, my favorite category, mystery and true crime. What are your picks?
You know that I'm biased here too. And I have 2 really fun picks. The first is Bad Actors by Mick Herron. And you may not know Mick Herron, but he is one of the best spy thriller writers writing these days. Every book in the series has been either nominated or won a Golden Dagger or Steel Dagger Award, which is the big prize in the UK. And in this book, it's MI5 is thrown sort of, everything's in chaos as they're one of their super forecasters, the people that tell the government how people are going to react to certain things, policies, and things that enact, goes missing. And the trail leads them back into MI5. And meantime, a Russian spy who's come into the country has slipped his escort, and everything is in chaos. Plus, all of these demoted spies are now causing trouble, as they do, as they're dragging their feet. They're called the slow horses. They're creating a little bit of chaos. And the great thing about Mick Herron's books, though, is, the spy stuff is spot on. The pacing is incredible. The nonstop threat and everything is great. But they're always really smart political thrillers, and there's a wonderful, wicked sense of humor about it, which is really important because things are really difficult right now. And so having something that you can kind of laugh at is really great. There's a lot of good guys, but there's a lot of bad guys and a lot of complications in this book. So it's a wonderful, wonderful escapist read. And then if you're looking for something a little more close to home, this is It Could Be Anyone by Jamie Hendricks. And Jamie Hendricks is a super fun suspense novelist. And this is almost like a villainous breakfast club where you are introduced to the 5 characters, the jock, the rich kid, the girl next door, all the characters that you expect. And as they're on their way, they're old college friends on their way to a destination wedding. In the very first page, the groom is killed. And you soon find that all of these people have a secret to hide. And some of them may be willing to go a little bit further to keep that secret hidden. It's 5 unreliable narrators that you'll love to hate or love and love and love. But it's really fun and twisty. And Jamie does a great job with putting that extra twist at the end for each one of her books. So loving this.
Kayla.
So my pick is The Counselors by Jessica Goodman. I love thrillers, but I'm also very afraid of thrillers. So when I read a thriller, it oftentimes has to be a YA pick so that it doesn't keep me up at night and just leave me terrified. And if you want a fun, really twisty YA take on the thriller genre, this is definitely the book for you. It takes place over the summer at camp. I'm someone that grew up going to camp, so I loved that scenery. And just everyone has a secret to hide. And then the first week of camp, a dead body shows up in the lake, and everyone's kind of trying to figure out what was going on. And there's just a lot of things get told and secrets are being hidden, and a lot of tension between the camp and the town that the camp is in. So if you were looking for just like a fun summery thriller that isn't gonna like totally freak you out, this is definitely the book for you.
All right, Rick.
So this has been instructive for me because this is always one of the kinds of books I have the most trouble talking about, because either I want to say too much or too little. I won't say, I'll try to say too little. It's better to err on that side. So the book I'll talk about is Two Nights in Lisbon by Chris Pavone. And the other thing is, I mean, doing this, especially with Luisa, no one's mentioned outside of her role at Book Passage. She's now the new editor, going to be the new editor in chief of Mysterious Press. So she can have a whole program to herself on this area of writing. This book by Chris Pavone, published by our friends, the Sean McDonald at McD and Daphne Durham, starts off in a city that so many people fancy being in, and that's Lisbon these days. And a woman wakes up in a hotel room, and she's there with her husband, except her husband's not there. She doesn't know where he is. She wakes up, there's no sign or trace of him. Furthermore, because she's come along, she's not sure the nature of the trip as she begins to find out what's happened to him, or tries to find out from others or report on things. So it goes from there. And the title, I think, tells you about the span of the book. So it's two very intense nights that he writes about. He's written several other novels. He's won the Edgar, the Anthony Award, and others. So it's really good. And yeah.
Oh, that sounds really fun.
Yeah.
All right. Next category, travel writing, travel books. I know when I'm traveling, it's fun to read, kind of, especially if we can't get too far away from home. We can travel to Lisbon for a missing husband, or Luisa.
Or actually, the not too far from home is a little bit of a theme on my travel books today. As I'm not able to travel. One of the ones that is great is Everyday Adventures. It comes from Lonely Planet. For those of us that can't get away, and that is many of us these days, how do you have an adventure when you're staying at home? Like, how do you make your home see some way new? There are wonderful, wonderful things you can do in here. Everything from maybe all of our favorite, which is the literary adventure, where you take a book. First, they say pick the first book on your left, read it until you find the first other country it mentions in it, and then go to that book, go to a book set in that country. And the goal is to try to do within 10 books back to the original country that you started in, which I think is fabulous. And then other things in here, like a place that you usually drive to, figuring out the hiking, like places you can hike between there and the other. So you actually see the area you live in instead of going from A to B, but see the whole expanse of what is between you. A really fun one is going to your favorite bar, asking the bartender what their favorite cocktail is, and then where they like to go to get that cocktail, and then going to that bar. And that might be a little bit dangerous, but it does sound like something that booksellers would excel at, I have to say. And maybe the most hysterical one is where they tell you how to do an adventure with children, where you let the children guide you, with the caveat being that the rules for staying safe still apply, and that you should never allow more than one children make the decision unless you want it to devolve into complete chaos. So this is a really fun book for those of us that are home but still looking to have a little bit of fun. And then for those of us who either live in California or love California, this is very different. I know this isn't exactly what you were asking for, but I have to talk about this book because I love the Forest Feast cookbooks so much. And this one is such a treat. Erin lives up in Napa County, but this book takes place in all of California. She takes a road trip through California and does everything from the grapes up in Napa to the avocados in San Diego, and does dishes. These are all vegetarian dishes. They're the book is gorgeously illustrated, and she stays in cabins and hosts dinner parties along the way. It is incredible tribute to California. I mean, we do have such wonderful agriculture and food in this state. So it's such a feast for the eyes, for your stomach, and just for loving the whole state. And at the end, she does do a thing where she tells you where she stays and the places she stays and the place she be. I'm gonna turn off my sound because my daughter is pinging my phone. I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
Right.
Kayla.
My book pick is The Catch Me If You Can by Jessica Nabango. Jessica is previously a blogger and was the first Black woman to have visited all 195 countries, which is quite the feat if you sit down and think about it. So this book is a small clip of all of the countries that she's been to. It's a really fun book to just kind of flip through if you just want some wanderlust and to go to whichever country that you're interested in. But it's also really great if you do have plans to travel somewhere that's in this book, to flip to that page and see what the top things she recommended are and what her experience was like there. So it's a fun book both to plan your future travels and to also look up maybe places you've been or places that you want to go as well.
Love it. Rick?
Kayla, that was a very good suggestion. I would say too, we were given this subject or category. There actually is a dearth right now of, I mean, given how many travel, and I think it's all the pandemic, the time span for publishers thinking about books, and they were thinking like, no one's traveling, and they didn't think of these kind of books that, I mean, they will come, there'll be more coming, and there are some. A little bit like Luisa, I jumped the fence though on this, and so I got out of the travel category. But I thought because of poetry, which is a very live section here, and it's often a great thing to travel with. And I also thought it's good to acknowledge, I think, a poet, Gary Snyder, who is certainly known to readers of Alta. This Library of America edition, which is going to be accompanied by Counterpoint, his longtime publisher based in the Bay Area, doing a collection of his uncollected late fragments, poems, translations. But this Big Library of America book is actually, you can tote this around. It's as elegant as they are, they're actually pretty compact. And it has the decades of incredible range, utterly vital work to knowing poetry, to knowing this part of the world and its relation to other parts of the world and the natural world. And Gary Snyder's 92 this year and still at it. So that to acknowledge. Another poet I was told is familiar to Alta readers, Ada Limon. She's also very much a California person, although she also spends time in the horse country in Kentucky. This new book, The Hurting Kind, every one of her collections just keeps getting finding more and more readers and speaking to all sorts of deep human and relational and political, cultural concerns in a very powerful way. And then I also wanted to add somebody less known, likely at this stage, a poet.
Right here in Alta.
Yes, there she is. Yes, there we go. And then a poet, Claudia Castroluna, who the Pacific Coast is very much part of her life, starting with childhood in El Salvador. Her family left in 1981. She was a teenager, basically ended up in LA, and she grew up in LA and then lived as an adult in the Bay Area, educated, and became a poet really up here, and has published, she's been the state poet laureate and a civic poet. But this new collection published by Tia Cucha out of San Fernando Valley, Luis Rodriguez, is beautifully done, a book of poems of El Salvador, of here, and many of the threads that connect time, place, having to leave El Salvador, but also finding an incredibly wonderful life here, even if often at political odds with things.
Interesting. All right, we're moving on to young adult or kids literature. While we might not have any kids in the audience, though we could, I know I have to pack for a kid when we travel. So what do you recommend, Luisa?
It's embarrassing to say, but I might be most excited about talking about this next book. I cannot stop talking about Skandar and the Unicorn Thief. I can't tell you how much I enjoyed this book. And it is, they say it's for ages 8 to 12. I refuse to believe that. I believe this is probably a precocious 8 and a very discerning 50-year-old probably could both enjoy this book. I loved it. For people that loved Harry Potter, honestly, I would put it up there with that. Aragon, they love that. The Percy Jackson series, this fits right in with that. We all think of unicorns as being these sweet, magical creatures that poop rainbows and such, but they are not the unicorns in Skandar and the Unicorn Thief. These are vicious, very violent animals full of strength and magic, just sort of unbridled magic. And the way that they control them in this book is that they're bonded with a 13-year-old child from birth. And when they're bonded with a child, they actually can be tamed and controlled, and the magic is controlled. Skandar has always dreamed of being a unicorn rider and having these great sky battles and races, and thinks that it's been denied until somebody comes and gets him and takes him, puts him on the island where all the unicorns roam free, and he becomes a unicorn rider. But he has a secret that he's trying to hide from everybody. And there is a villain on the loose that is maybe connected to him. It's so good. I don't want to give too much away, but it is, if you love world building, if you love magic, if you love adventure, this is such a great, incredible book. So I really recommend this to anybody that enjoys those books. And then if you want something a little more gentle, the Tea Dragon series that started out with the Tea Dragon Society, and now we have the Tea Dragon Festival, is amazing. It's just this delightful, charming, manga-inspired story. And this is actually a prequel, even though it's the second book to the other book, but they can be read individually. And they're books about community and sort of about personal growth. And it's in this place of magic where these small dragons actually grow tea leaves from their horns, and in this one in particular, they encounter what they consider a real dragon instead of these silly little tea dragons, who is fallen asleep, supposed to be protecting the town, but has fallen asleep for 80 years and is questioning his own role and what, if he's let everybody down and what he's lost by being asleep for so long. It's a delightful, sweet, sweet book.
Kayla?
My young adult pick is perfect for if you have a reluctant teen reader or someone who you're trying to foster a love for books. So it is The Summer I Turned Pretty by Jenny Han. The TV series just came out, so I feel like it's been a lot of buzz on social media this weekend, so it's definitely not a obscure pick. But The Summer I Turned Pretty is that perfect kind of young adult, slight romance, and also coming into yourself when you're in your early teens and starting to figure out who you are. It's about this young teen who has always spent summers at a beach house and is with her mom's best friend and their kids, and just kind of growing up, growing older, and starting to come into adulthood. So many people have told me that it's the book that helped them fall in love with reading. So I think it's really that perfect summary pick if maybe you love reading or maybe you don't quite yet. I also think it's a great book for adults, as I just recently read it as well.
All right, Rick?
So young adult books, there've been a whole group of them that have been written by people writing adult novels, now writing young adult novels. Akwaeke Emeze is one, although Akwaeke Emeze had written an earlier YA. But Casey McQuiston, who has been one of the writers kind of turning around the adult romance world. I never thought I'd be even talking about adult romance novels, but we now have a Glossier shop across the street from us. That's also part of why we have some of the readers we have. It's great. But Casey McQuiston has been part of that with her novels, Red, White, and Royal Blue, and One Last Stop. This one, I Kissed Shara Wheeler, is about a young girl whose mothers they all move from Southern California to Alabama. And she goes from a little more freewheeling circumstance to a Christian academy, and persists in certain ways, and then finds herself navigating a whole sorts of other ways. And there's sort of that whole youthful exploration of identity, of longing, of romance. And I think it's something, the way she writes, it's something that resonates with older people too. Choices made and not made, moments or opportunities taken and not taken, all those things. And it's a wonderful, fun book that Casey McQuiston's adult readers are turning to too.
All right, last category, short stories, essays, short flight stories.
Short site. So these are essays for me, from Elena Ferrante. For those of you that love the Elena Ferrante books, I mean, her essays, this is 4 short essays on writing, on language, on the influences on her. Same beautiful lyrical writing, but it addresses women writers, it addresses feminism, it addresses the influences that were on her own writing, how she looks at writers. She talks about Emily Dickinson and Gertrude Stein. It is really just a beautiful book for anybody that loves reading, is interested in writing. It's a wonderful book. It's the slim book, so easy to take on vacation, but a real treat.
Kayla?
My pick is Ghost Lover by Luisa Taddeo. Lisa also wrote Three Women, which is just one of my all-time favorite nonfiction books as well, and is just a spectacular writer. The premise of Ghost Lover is it is 9 short stories about the women who run a dating service, and from different points of view, and about love, about lust, about desire, which is something that Luisa Taddeo definitely is spectacular at writing about. So I have not read it yet, but I'm very excited for it, as I know it's going to be excellent coming from her.
Awesome. Rick?
So quickly, the book of essays, a book of one of the many, this book called You've Changed by Piet Mo Tet War, there's 4 names there, who is a writer who left Myanmar, her home country, and was educated mostly in the UK. I think she's been in the US as well. And she's moved back to Myanmar. So, and so many of the stories are one-way moves out of countries to the West, and she's moved back. So it's a book of really insightful pieces. This could have gone in the travel category for some if you're here thinking of going there, and talks a lot about the political, cultural, and other things she's dealt with. A book of stories, quickly, Ruth Freeman, who has done a wonderful book. She's done 2 novels with Grey Wolf Press, and this book of stories called Sleeping Alone gives us a Ruth Freeman who's lived in the US many years, and after 2 novels set in her home country of Sri Lanka, gives us stories set in various places, in Ireland, in Sri Lanka, and in the city she lives in now, Philadelphia. And very moving story, for example, about Kobe Bryant, who grew up and went to high school where her family has gone to high school, and his death. And so she does all kinds of unexpected things in these stories. There's all sorts of twists and turns, and not predictable ones either. So a wonderful book by a writer. Anything she's written is worth reading. So
This has been amazing. It was like a mini marathon of could you print the books Rick just mentioned? What we are going to do is our wonderful Jessica Blau, who works with me, my colleague at Alta, has taken copious notes. We got most of these titles ahead of time. There are some new ones we didn't know about. We're gonna, this whole interview has been recorded. We will email it to you all along with the list of picks, as well as links on where you can buy them while supporting independent booksellers like Book Passage, Elliott Bay Book Company, and bookshop.org. Most importantly, I am so grateful to all 3 of you for taking the time, the thought to put this together for us. It was just so enjoyable. So many, many thanks to you, Luisa, Kayla, and Rick. And I invite everyone to join us next week for Alta Live, Wednesday, June 29th at 12:30 p.m., where I will welcome Siren Nagakairi. They are a disabled hiking activist, all about accessibility for the outdoors. And I am very much looking forward to welcoming them to Alta Live. Again, that's June 29th at 12:30. Thank you, everyone. This has been really fun.
thank you all. Thanks.
Thank you all. Thank you, Beth. Thank you, Rick and Kayla.
Thanks, guys. Happy reading.
Yes.
Cheers.